Chapter 8, Stealing. C enjoyed ripping things off. You could call it an ingrained character defect. It started in grade school. She stole 8 pieces of colored construction paper from a supply cabinet near the janitor's room. After 3 days, returned it all unused. This behavior excited her. She called it puffering. Like a good catnip, she would get puffed up from the danger and unpredictable outcome of her misbehavior, which of course had been relined since grade school. After all, sober days at times can become quite boring. This character defect, like any others, made her feel good without actually being good. She did feel possessed when she took ownership of the misplaced. She rationalized and called her naughtiness straightening up, reorganizing, downsizing, or refunding when the sought-after item was found by her. No harm, no foul, whatever that means. No real intended pain without a chicken. The current plane of existence often didn't make sense. CENTS, anyway. That's why fame was the answer, as it had been for her relative roots of long ago. As the favorite pastime, puffering was fun for her, but it often looked like it wasn't fun for its victims. A lost and found game it was not. Others' disregard of an item she found carelessly placed by them on countertops, stairs, floors, beds, ledges, tables, was a trigger for her to puff, to do it, get amused, act out. Those lost objects were scrutinized, cleaned up, and put back in their proper place determined by C. Rubber bands, pens, and remote control magazines, and such were all fair game. Once organized, she would wait and watch, sometimes put the future sought-after prize in what she considered plain, PLANE, sight, but often still undetected. Okay, they had their chance. So it would be retaken, redone, put away, re-waited for, and re-watched. The seeker would inevitably become quite excited, distressed, once they finally realized their loss. They would start asking where they had left their missing item, now quickly becoming a family heirloom. Yearned for, more precious to them, and missed, rising to a higher status, object dart, so to speak. This puffering was fun. When looking for it, they weren't even warm. She did enjoy this self-imposed entertainment ritual. Finally, tiring of the victim's distress, she would help them find their wanted. Acting as a heroine, she would go to her private place, which stays private, locate the missing thing, and eureka! Presenting the sought-after to the searching victim made her feel well-liked, valued by association. A sense of importance would wash over her, like when she would lie in front of the television and pretend those couch potatoes were looking at her instead of the 56-inch screen. Anyway, suspense over. Relief was felt by all. The victim got their precious back. C found 15 minutes of fame. This advanced game of give and take wasn't lastingly satisfying, just like electrolysis. She wanted more. She wanted all the attention only true fame can give. The Cheshire thought she could become a famous treasure by becoming temporarily lost, like a misplaced item, to rise up while being put down. She just needed some personal hiding space to steal. She thought everyone else was wrong about the value of her art. They just didn't know it. Chapter 9, Self-Copy. Besides stealing, she could rely on her copying tendencies as well. The C needed to spend some time in order to save time. The copycat decided to hide behind an old self-portrait. Unfortunately, the one she found in her art studio was completed when she was much younger, didn't look at all like her current self. It had stayed the same. She had strayed and decayed quite a bit since then. She could see her stripes were thicker when younger, and now her stripes were folding in on themselves, giving her blacks and whites a thinner, misaligned appearance. So to improvise, what could go wrong? C decided to use a ceiling panel in the corner of her art studio above the tax cabinet as a canvas. To obtain access to the 4 drawers, they were pulled up out in a decreasing distance to produce a makeshift stairway to up. She painted over herself by using a fresh black Sharpie, some correction fluid, and tape. Traced herself on herself. Glad no color was needed, as she hadn't had that class yet either. She knew with her eyes and mouth closed she could disappear into her ebony and ivory. Now totally wet with product, she rolled around on her newfound ceiling tile whites. Once completed, ta-da-da! She dragged her masterpiece up the tax cabinet, 1 drawer step at a time. She hoisted herself and dart to the top. She reached above for the railings and pulled herself up, placed the front side of her newest traced creation towards the art room floor. Once in her new plane of existence, she laid back on the back side of her self-rendition, hidden from view in the dark of the drop ceiling. She became deadened to all she left behind. Electrically self-inflated by stealing the ceiling space on top of her marked spot, C clearly was not losing her place and time. This was her higher plane of existence. She realized she had painted herself into a corner, self-framed for self-copying, insulated from the world, a stolen place and space. Blending into her stripes, she swallowed her tongue, lost her smile, closed her eyes into a black slit, but opened just enough to see the comings and goings in her art studio. She became another misplaced item, unnoticed, disappearing into the deadness, breathed in tranquil air on string theory. Submerged herself in a meditative state which changed everything. She became her own ceiling fan. Gone cat. No pressure to initiate, to become famous, answer another call for artists. She was hanging up while letting go. Misplaced for 3 days, the concern started to look for her. Where did our precious CeeCee go? Typical. The owl gathered a search party. Well-wishers came to look for her in her art. The stuff of gallery refusals and no calls from artists for artists. 365 urban sketches. The buggy, heron, iris, shaken spear, autopilot, arrival, Mr. Hyde, hope, tree huggers, her sketchbooks, her younger self-portrait, 3 watercolor paints, a transparency fog scene she couldn't really name, On the Rocks, Love Never Dies, self-help booklet. Her boots all became coveted by the many, but mainly, she noticed, by other artists. They began to buy this art stuff while she peeked down from above. Art was now on sale, and sale it did. S-A-I-L. The result? A completely cleaned out art studio, except for the 4-drawer metal tax cabinet and ceiling panels. Fame had naturally followed now that her creation's supplies were now others' mementos. The owl came into this new empty space, closed the 4 drawers of the stairway, walked with more pocket money than usual, completed a full wingspan, and gradually started to move in. He added fishing books, catalogs, staples, then came the fiddle, harmonica, music handouts, pig-nosed speaker, an inflatable fishing boat, chairs, and a nest. Sometimes the owl would come into her old art studio and often just look for her too. He would look into that corner ceiling panel hanging on the metal drop frame, yes, above the 4-drawer file cabinet of her art studio, thinking, looks like old water damage. Staring at this corner, his forehead would begin to imitate the lines on which he focused. He never cared much for her artistic expression, too abstract. However, there was enough of a similar pattern for him at times in the distressing ceiling pain to be reminded of his missing puss. He then would beautifully spread his wings. This was good enough for CeeCee, because as she held still and watched him from above through the ceiling panel, thought, he sees my self-portrait and misses me. Again, her cognitive error of self-evaluation was not letting her down. She wanted to smile more than ever in these moments of insight. She thought this space-time stealing was a very cheap way to recycle her art supplies and drawings. She felt water in her eyes. Her 66 stripes started to smudge. She was losing her whites. 50 of them began blending in shades of Dorian gray. Tired of squinting down all the time, knowing she couldn't make sense or fame when temporarily deadened and whitened out. A wrinkle in time for which she did not plan. After her cosmic relief, looking for a conversion, she wanted to get back to start. So she swallowed her pride, put back her tongue in cheek, pushed back her copied self-portrait, let go of her self-imposed fame and frame, dropped down, yes, onto the top of her 4-drawer tax cabinet and into her old current with a shift in time, replaced the ceiling tile, straightened her body lines the best she could, and with blind faith leapt to the floor and went to look for her owl for answers. The owl was happy to see her back. He brought her into his new study. The owl showed her how he had decorated his new claimed positive space in her art studio, how her fame money was spent on purchasing others' artifacts of his interest. Fish paintings, fish heads, fish tails, fishing graph data, and the like. There was no negative space for her anymore. She pretended to be surprised by what he had done to her old art studio. Her lines were replaced by his 7-foot spread. They went fishing for her leftovers. Only her ceiling fan, self-portrait, aka water damage, remained, and of course the 4-drawer tax cabinet. She finally got all her answers. She hadn't really lived at all. No more need to draw lines in life. Time to forget her old lines. Enjoy the invisible lines ahead. It no longer mattered which of her 9 lives she was living, even though she wasn't all there herself.